Islam, and welcome to Moor's Heritage and History School. This is your host, Annie Hill, along with my co-host, Ms. Raheem Alice L.
Peace and love, Anna E. Peace and love, Moors, everybody, everywhere.
Right.
Joe, everybody.
Islam.
Indeed.
All right. Cujo Adwa L.
Islam, peace and love, Moors.
Islam, Moor. Love.
And Rosmarie Ben did press 1.
Oh. All right. I did everything, but I didn't press 1. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Can you hear me all right? Oh, because
yeah.
I'm on this new device. It sounds good. It works well.
Islam, good.
All right. Islam, peace and love to all.
Indeed.
All right. Before we get started, we always, first of all, let everyone know that the chat room is open. I want to send a big shout out to our family listening over in South Africa, Japan, the Netherlands, Great Britain, Cuba, Venezuela, going to areas that we haven't, I should say, to family we have yet to connect with. Thank you so much for listening. And big shout out to our weekly callers. Thank you so much for joining us, filling up the chat, filling up all of the lines before the show even begins, lending us your energy so that we as a family can build and grow together as we uplift fallen humanity.
Sure.
Yes. In addition, every week we make a public announcement of the Moors we have information on who have been kidnapped and are being held hostage income by these corporations disguised as government who go by the name of county, city, town, township, borough. If you were listening to the broadcast last, or I think maybe the week before, we went over borough. We went over the definition of borough. We found out a borough is nothing more than a corporation, company. And I want to say maybe last year, we also did a broadcast where we went into the Black Star 4th edition again, and we looked up the words county, city, municipality, and we found out that all these words denote to a property/corporation, our language. Now, instead of saying county, city, town, township, borough, we instead say the corporate name because that's what they are.
Sure.
And we also advise all of the union states that these companies/corporations are in purview or is in purview of. And the reason for that is every union state is by law bound and obligated to protect all people from domestic and foreign invasion. As we began our studies, we learned that it is not these states that are attacking us, it's not the feds, it's really these employees of these companies/corporations that are disguised as government going by the name of county, city, town, township, borough. If you do not believe me, go and look up these words in the Black's-Law Dictionary and, of course, in your unabridged dictionary prior to 1965. Look up the etymology of these words. It's all there. So we begin with our sister Abkarebe, who was kidnapped through a joint venture between Memphis and Shelby Corporation. Daoud Hill, we don't have the corporation that has kidnapped him, so we just give the purview Union State, and that is Arkansas, Amir Muslim Hill, and Kusu Rock Push Bay under the purview of Missouri, Sarpatah Island Bay under the purview of Ohio, Jeremy Taylor Hill, Cherry Thorn Bay, J. McCall Brooks Bay, Joseph Kennedy Hill, Bush Amir Bunch Hill, Emmanuel Billings Bay, Justin Khalid Alamin Hill, and Michael Curry Bay, all under the purview of North Carolina, Noble Crystal Hill under the purview of New Jersey, Messiah Aziz Hill and Crystal Hill, kidnapped through a joint venture between Mercer, Freehold, and Trenton Corporation under the purview of New Jersey, Eldridge Teron Fisher Hill, Marquise Devion Hill under the purview of Louisiana, Solomon Hill Bay, Mumiahu Bay under the purview of Texas, William Barrett Hill under the purview of Virginia, Bomani Abidwell Hill, kidnapped by the Chesapeake Corporation under the purview of Virginia, Che Ray Bay under the purview of West Virginia, Thomas Lee Bay under the purview of California, Eduardo Valle Juarez Hill, kidnapped by Holland Corporation under the purview of Georgia, Patricia Bay and her infant baby, as well as Malik Hill Bay, all kidnapped by Atlantic Corporation under the purview of New Jersey. There's many, many more sons and sisters that have been kidnapped and are being held for income. These prisons are full of the Aboriginal indigenous people of this land, branded Negro, colored, black, that are being held for the sole purpose of generating revenue. Now, the reason that we say this is because law, in order for a crime to be committed, there must be flesh and blood injured party. And there is none. 99.9% of the time, there is no injured party. And even if there is an injured party, the charges cannot be brought by a fiction. It must be brought by a party of interest, or, let me rephrase that, they must have, this is what I'm looking for, they must have standing, not just to bring the case, but to speak on the case. So if there is no flesh and blood being that has brought the charges, no crime has been committed. All right, so that's let's see, that's our horses that have been kidnapped and are being held hostage. I got an email for another more. However, I didn't have the free appellation, so I couldn't include it. So we'll update that list next week. Just want to also let everyone know, if you didn't know, we did not have Sisters Centered on Law this Sunday. And the reason for that is because we felt that with the family that would be coming back and forth and spending time, that maybe it wouldn't be a good time to do the Sisters Centered on Law, so we will be doing it I think it's the 3rd of January. So make sure and tune in for that. Not sure. Rob, is the syllabus up yet? Rob?
It'll be up by the end of the show. I'm working on it now.
Oh, all right. So, yeah, we got the syllabus. It's just for the introduction. We got the syllabus up. And you'll be doing is you'll be pulling down the syllabus along with the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1786. As I was going through the syllabus, I found some very interesting things to which, it will be addressed in the syllabus. So make sure and look for that either at the end of tonight's broadcast or tomorrow. And also tomorrow we're going to be doing a special broadcast. We will not be live near Harlem Corporation. We will be doing a live broadcast tomorrow, and I believe it's going to be a continuation of last Wednesday's discussion / class on astrology. And so make sure and check us out for that tomorrow beginning at 7:30. All right, so we're going to get into today's broadcast, which the syllabus has been sent out along with an attachment referencing the article that we'll be talking about. If you are not on the email list, if you do not receive the syllabus and you would like to receive the syllabus, send an email to MHHS-Eyes Wide Open at gmail.com, and in the subject line, put syllabus. And I'm going to add you to the list, so you'll get the syllabus every week. So this week I was what I was looking for. I'm always looking for something, and get these ideas that run into my head, and I go on to the internet, and I'm looking for this, that, and the other, and I was looking for something, and I saw this article, and I started skimming through it, and I was like, oh, boy, this is quite interesting. So I felt that it might be an appropriate discussion to have today. And, and it's regarding the right to travel. So you want to travel. Do you have to have a, quote, real ID card in order to do so? That is a good question. Who is mandated to have it, and by whose authority? That would be your quo warranto. If you looked up the definition of quo warranto, it's by whose authority. Also, who is this for? Where is it written that corporations can compel the people to act in a certain way? It is real. The real ID card is a regulation, but it doesn't really say who it applies to, how, and by what authority. Everything is by presumption. The question to ask is, how do you know it applies to the people? Came into my head. I'm going to read a little bit of the article because I had an experience that I also want to remember to share around this whole right to travel thing, and it made me stop and think. Many of us redo things based on presumption. It's like we're cows to the slaughter. He's doing it, she's doing it, I better do it too. We never stop to ask the question, well, who does it apply to? Can I see the documentation that supports it? I want to read it for myself. Maybe I might come to the same conclusion, maybe not. But I will have first-hand knowledge. And it's interesting because this was my thinking regarding an experience I had last week, ending of last week. And here I went into this article about a real ID card. So I just want to read a little bit of it. It's not very long. It did get sent out as an attachment. It's probably not really 3 pages, but I PDF'd the whole thing. So no, it is 3 pages. I want to read a little bit of it. And I really don't want to really get into it too much, but I just want to share some thoughts. The title of this article is T period, S period, A period, moves closer to rejecting some state driver's license for travel. Now, immediately my thinking is, what is T.S.A. Now, some people might already know, but I'm a stickler for acronyms. What do they mean? And why are you using it? And why aren't you spelling the whole thing out? So I read this article, which is dated December 28, 2015. It's very recent. As soon as next year, a driver's license may no longer be enough for airline passengers to clear security in some states if the Department of Homeland Security has its way. Now they have referenced a second entity. Now, what most people have never done is ask, what is this TSA? It gives you what the acronym for TSA is, and later on in the article, in the next line. And exactly what is the Department of Homeland Security? Because we see these words, department and federal, and immediately we make this presumption, oh, they're government. No, everything has to be verified. How are they government? How do you know they're government? Where's their paperwork? Where is it that they are delegated any powers? And if they have been delegated powers, what exactly does those powers entail? One of the things that I see with all people, Moors and those other citizens, is we don't ask the appropriate questions. We make assumptions. We've been mentally conditioned to just go with the flow. And at this time, we are being forced to take responsibility for ourselves. Many Moors is coming into this kicking and screaming. They ain't got no problem declaring their name correction and proclamation, but then when you tell them, look, you're responsible for yourself, they're like, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I'm looking for my nation to come and speak for me, which automatically lets me know they don't even know what the word nation means. But we got to take responsibility for ourselves. That's what this is all about, teaching us to be ourselves, to be independent. So the next sentence says, federal officials said they would soon determine whether Transportation Security Administration, here's your TSA, agents would start enforcing a 10-year-old law that requires states to comply with a set of federal standards when issuing driver's license. That's all I'm going to read, because I'm going to tell you, most of the people who read this article, they're already on the presumption that they're dealing with lawful government and that there is some requirement for the people as it relates to their right to travel. Nobody's asked a question. Nobody has asked for the so-called law thing about 10-year-old law. 10 years this so-called law was written, and it has not, and it's saying it's a requirement. It's 10 years old, and everybody has not complied. Is it really a law? Can I see it? Can I read it? I want to know for sure. What does it say? I don't want nobody to be interpreting this for me. It's so almost ironic, except that I don't believe in coincidences. I think everything happens for a reason, as Roz would always say. Divine law governs all events. And it's an issue because last week, I don't know what made me do it, but I did it. I called the Department of Motor Vehicle, and I asked the person who answered the phone, sounded like a little Latino young lady. I asked her, what is the policy and procedures and requirements for this driver's license? And the little girl got a little attitude with me. You don't know the law? And I said, no, I do not. You don't know the law? I said, no, I do not. Well, everybody has to have a driver's license. So I said, okay, where can I go to read this law? She got a little stink attitude with me. You don't know the law? And then proceeded to tell me to hold on. She comes back and she says, I'm going to transfer you to somebody who you can talk to. Immediately, now, she just let me know she don't know the law either. But I'm just trying to gather information. She's trying to, get a little stink attitude with me because I'm asking her for the law. I realize she's getting stink attitude because she don't know. Not my problem, though. I'm on a mission. So I get transferred to the legal department. And when you hear that word legal, everything becomes questionable. So the woman that answers the phone, she says, how can I help you? I said, well, I was told that there is a law regarding the driver's license, and the person that answered the phone couldn't answer or tell me where to go and find it, so she transferred me to you. This woman says, well, it's on the Internet. I said, well, I'm old school. I don't do Internet. I need to read the paper. Where can I get a copy? She says again, well, you can get it off the Internet. I said, I don't have a computer. I don't have access to it. I don't do Internet. I'm old school. I need a hard copy. Where can I go to get a hard copy? She says, oh, you can go to your town. I said, I am not a member of any town. So then she said, now already she's letting me know she don't know law either. So then she says, hold on, and comes back to the phone, and she says, one of my coworkers said you can go to the state library. And I said, okay, not a problem, I can go there. Then she says, but I don't know if they're going to give you what you're asking for. And I said, this is very concerning. This is starting to concern me greatly. So my most, heartfelt voice. I'm very concerned now because you're telling me that there is a law that I am supposed to follow, but I can't get a copy of it so that I can read it and know what I can and cannot do. I'm very concerned. This is very concerning to me. So she then said, well, you can try the court library. And I said, all right, not a problem. And she said, and it's not open to the public. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go to the state library and take my chances. And I'll go from there. And I said, thank you very much, and you have a good day. And I hung up. But it made me realize, well, damn. Now, I already have a copy of the federal policy. See, it's still a policy. It's not law. The only law on this land is the supreme law of the land. Everything else that they're writing is not law. That's why they call them statutes. Now, you know, I forgot to mention, when I was talking with the woman in the legal department, she says to me, well, I think I asked her, I should have recorded the call because it was very informative. But she says to me, I think I asked her, well, who wrote the law? So I already know who wrote the policy from a federal level. I wanted to see what she was going to say. So I asked her, well, who wrote the law? She said, oh, your legislature, the legislative people or body, I forget the word, legislature wrote the law. I said, the legislature of what? She said, oh, the state. I said, really, the state? Yeah, legal department now. I said, really? I wasn't aware the state had the authority to write law. She says, oh, yes, they do. Immediately, she let me know she don't know jack about the Constitution. So now what I learned, just in this little conversation, is that everybody, including these people sitting in these positions, is functioning off of presumption. Now, the people sitting in these positions say it, but ignorance of the law is no excuse. But that's a double-edged sword. It swings both ways. And for the vast majority of people who's just going like cows led to slaughter to this whole motor vehicle program, who don't one time ask for the written law so that they can review it, ignorance of the law is no excuse. We can no longer just take it for granted. We don't have to be arrogant. We don't have to talk in an unintelligent tone. We don't have to be vulgar. We can be right as the law that we ought to be standing on and ask simple questions like, can I have a copy of the law? I want to know what I can and cannot do. See, and you got to take that type of approach because your objective is to get a copy of this invisible law that nobody knows but everybody is following, and you can't seem to get a copy of it from nobody. Even the people administering the damn program don't know the law and don't catch your attitude, as my brothers would say. Catch your attitude because you're asking them to explain the law that they just realized that they themselves do not know. Not my fault. I know when I was every job that I have ever worked in, of course, I was never in a job where there was a need for me to know the law like the people working in the Department of Transportation. But every job that I have always had, I always knew what they was talking about. I knew the policy because I'm not going to get caught looking like an idiot. And I mean, shit rolls downhill, but it ain't going to roll on me. So that was my lesson. It was an interesting lesson, and I felt that it was so appropriate to share it with the family because we all do this, not just the right to travel. Another thing that I realized is whenever we get some sort of an injury, for some reason, we all think we got to go to this institution they call a hospital. We don't. Where you written that you have to do that? And, you know, I remember it wasn't too long ago, most of our ancestors, they passed form in their bed, surrounded by the family, who 9 times out of 10 was saying something or, candles was lit, something was, maybe an incense or something was burning, but I remember singing. And I remember we were all around their beds. Nowadays, everybody is dying in a hospital where they are nickeling and diming you right out the door into the casket. Why are we doing that? Where is it written that we got to die or we got to pass on in a hospital, so-called hospital? Well, I guess it is a hospital if you look at the definition. But my point is, we do too much based on presumption. We need to stop. We need to ask, can I have a copy of the law? You don't need to be belligerent. You don't need to be arrogant. But one thing I know we can put to bed, like ASAP, is our right to travel. If people would just ask simple, non-threatening questions like, can I please have the law so that I can know what I can and cannot do? You want to say it like that, because there is nothing in the Constitution that authorizes any public servant or presumed public servant from dictating the actions of the people, but your objective is to get the documentation. That's it. You want to get the documentation, because I'm going to tell you what I know. I read the documentation that these people who are administering the policy haven't even read. And it is 1,000% for commercial activity. It was initiated for the railroad specifically, and I can see where they would have to mandate the railroad people, but even this real ID, if you look at the wording of it, it's not for people. Because of presumption, many people are going to go and voluntarily sign up for that which is not applicable to the people, just because of presumption and lack of information. We got to study like the Prophet strongly suggested we do. Islam?
Islam. Indeed.
So
you go ahead, bro. Yeah.
You go ahead, Noble. Do this thing, yo.
Nah, well, I mean, he just put a lot of information on the table, which caused reflective thought, and that was great. So first and foremost, I just want to say before we get into before I touch on this Real ID Act, I just want to say for archive purposes and for the record, this is our last class in the timetable of the 2015 Gregorian calendar year. On the E, you always shout everybody out weekly. I just wanted to take a moment to say, look, I'm thankful to be able to be on this line with you all every week. And among other things, for the information that you constantly bring, my mom, Cujo, all of you, we're going into a timetable, even though time doesn't exist, but just looking at the numbers for archive purposes, 2016, that's the 9. I just trust that we keep it going and take this information to other levels for the listeners as well, specifically with this subject of real IDs, etc. So with that being the case, it's when you look at the fact that, quote-unquote, the feds are saying to the quote-unquote states that they have to change their IDs, it kind of draws the thought of what we already know, which is the fact that, all right, if they're challenging the validity of these, quote, driver's license as being an identification, Moors are challenging, the validity of these driver's license being, quote, identifications. you can see that there's something definitely on the political level going on. Not that any of them have jurisdiction over us, period. But the fact that it's even being questioned itself, whereas you've had people falsely accused of not having real IDs if it wasn't, quote, state ID, it wasn't real. Now you look at it like, you look back at it and reflect like, well, everybody at this point is basically questioning the validity of these IDs these, quote, licensed instruments that have been alleged to be IDs, but are really not identifications. I say that in conjunction with the fact how imperative it is that you were saying that we not move off of presumptions, because when you talk about identity and we look at the definition, the first thing it says is in the law of evidence, right? So in the law of evidence, this instrument does not pass for identity. It never really did, though it's being questioned now in more of a broader scope, but that's because, different paths have been blazed, and it's a matter that definitely has to be addressed. I say specifically for progress in the North American land. I don't say that I agree with what they're trying to impose, but and in some portions have already imposed, because also too that's kind of like a violation of privacy. But as far as Moors in the north and in the western hemisphere and anywhere really, those instruments don't supersede our universal right to self-determination, And with that being said, it's like, what is a real ID? As a nation, we have real IDs, real identifications. I mean, we could go to the fact that, your real identification is in your blood, but as far as externalizing that thought, Moors, we have true identifications, that are internationally, have international standing. That being the case, it's like when they talk about identities, we have to understand what our nationality means, on the political level. So I say that to correlate this reference, all right, because we know the correlation between how words have been implied, things have been misrepresented as identity, and it's not, identities have been stolen. You have Europeans calling themselves Americans now. This is going on. Quasi-national domiciles calling themselves states. But what I had from a reflective thought was this, right? In all reality, we are one nation, and this is how it correlated for me with this particular reference. Whether you're from North American land, Aboriginal, Indigenous, South American land, Eastern Hemisphere, this is all one land, but we're all one nation as well. And what I looked at, what I was thinking, like when we think of places like Brazil, Argentina, things like that, in an aspect, they've been implied to be nationalities, but in the aspect of going back further, these are nations that really just created different zones and territories, which were de jure states, but they weren't really quasi-national domiciles, just de jure states. And it correlated to me with this as far as identity is concerned. It says, every nation possessing its own territories and subject to its own laws is an independent state, right? So this was from Institutes of International Law in Time of Peace, page 39. All right, so every nation possessing its own territories subject to its own laws is an independent state, not necessarily a quasi-national domicile. So even when they had these quote-unquote quote unquote, and I emphasize so-called state IDs, they really weren't. They were and are quasi-national instruments. They're not officially national status because all of these quote unquote states or union states are started off as corporations, companies. And again, I mean, you emphasize that enough, you know, that these are corporations. So with that being the case, these corporations are not being nationalities like, you know, Florida is not a nationality. Idaho is not a nationality. New Jersey is not a nationality. Delaware, etc. These are not nationalities. These are brand names or Christian brand names of corporations doing business in a particular territory, you know, and they never were valid. And getting past that part being the main issue, now it's like, all right, we have to look at it on a higher level, whereas, you know, there's none of the corporations could actually issue the instruments or documentation that actually, you know, supersedes our self-determination and universal right to self-identify. My last piece on in reference on the subject of the state. Subject of the state. This again is international law or rules regulating the intercourse of states in peace by Henry Wagner Halleck. And here he says, the state itself remains the same political body until its identity is destroyed by interruption in its existence as a separate and distinct political body. So I'm looking at that statement and I'm like, all right, so with these quote-unquote corporations called Homeland Security, you know, the federal government, all of these things, these interfering, you know, with what people have assumed to be states, it kind of correlated to me with that because its identity is destroyed, you know, and it says that it remains the same political body until its identity is destroyed by interruption. So if they're saying that, okay, this identification is not valid, you know, and this is so-called state identification, you know, then in its own aspect, this state is being destroyed. The identity of quote-unquote states is being destroyed, but in the aspect is being recognized for what it really is because they're quasi-national domiciles. Like that was an interruption on it, as it said. It says, and neither is discharged, and it neither loses any of its rights nor is discharged from any of its duties by mere municipal change or internal revolution. So, like, they're telling you here, too, that Roman venues, municipal venues, really don't have the ability to change, you know. And even when they try to start internal revolutions, they still can't supersede, you know, the law of the land, the American land.
Yes.
So that's the main thing. And when we look at the affirmative law of the land, you know, the American Republic Constitution 1791 agreed upon as a international act for the law of this particular land, the Western Hemisphere. The Ninth Amendment, you know, where it goes in, it says that, you know, the rights not enumerated in the Constitution shall not be infringed, shall not be construed to deny or disparage those retained by the people. So it's letting you know there, even in that supreme law of the land, that they can't supersede the rights of the people. That's just what it is. And the fundamental right to identify yourself, you know, because none of these quasi-national domiciles issue nationality cards. There never was identification. So when the people say, you know, specifically the Aboriginal people of the land, Moors, Americans to be specific, you know, decide, look, you don't provide proper identification in the law of evidence, we're taking it into our own hands to uniform identify ourselves, in a uniform fashion. Like, that's a supreme right of the people, and it's constitutionally protected, by the Ninth Amendment. And again, going into the year 2016, which that equals up to a 9, I'm just, thankful to be here and express my views with y'all. And with that being said, I'm going to yield the floor for now, family. Islam. Indeed.
Well, let me throw this in. Just to throw this in, that we have to keep in mind that if foreign people are taking the perspective or taking the position of claiming that they have the authority to issue so-called identity cards, whether through license, passport, birth certificate, whatever, we have to check the timeline to see who really has jurisdiction as nation states. Because if after Lincoln there was no real United States of America corporation got infiltrated and those people took over, that was their beginning of the corporate jurisdictions that Noble Drew Ali saw coming, being that he's prophet, and he came in 1913. By 1929, had a civic jurisdiction where individuals who are of sound mind can exercise their quote-unquote rights based on them being tied to the estate because of their nationality being proclaimed, declared, whatever, through this institution that he founded. And then even a lower level jurisdiction, an incorporated jurisdiction, was even created by Noble Drew Ali. Before the real incorporation of nation states, he incorporated the first nation state. Because remember, the same thing that they're saying about the nation state, it goes back to the customs, which Noble Drew Ali told the Moors in all his literature that you got to make up your own customs because you're a nation state. You're not just some people that's joining some organization because you want to better your people. We are supposed to be self-sufficient by now. Because, it's like, it makes you want to throw the computer off the balcony. Because we had manufacturing companies and all that under the umbrella of the Moorish movement in Noble Drew Ali's time. And there's not one thing right now around today stabilized that we can say, why? Because people took this as joining something.
Yep.
They didn't see this as this is their birthright. Everybody wanted to have somebody to chase behind. Nobody wanted to take the time to study to know what's going down. No different than, and history repeats itself. No different than Malachi York. What did he do? He used the same knowledge, right, to beat up on these so-called Georgia city of whatever, trying to pull rank, right? Claim nationality, build everything, but then what? Once they cut the head off, the body's done for. Because the body wasn't taught how to grow another head.
You can't.
right? Because remember, if you talk to Drew Pukum and all that stuff, you know, we got that. That's our culture. Cut my arm off, grow another arm. It's not no big deal, right? So the people have to be the ones to realize what it is that they have. Realize that these blog talk shows and all that stuff, you're gonna hear, you know, list of people who got kidnapped. But you're not hearing about the 500 million people out there that are exercising their birthright, that are actually beating cases, getting kicked out of prison, all types of stuff like that. Go to court and then tell, oh, sorry, your stuff's dismissed, but you don't have to come in here. You don't hear those examples to recognize how real this is.
Right.
You don't hear the examples. Yeah, you don't hear the examples of FBI going to check Moors to find out if they're real Moors.
Yeah.
Are you guys the real Moors? Are you guys the sovereign Moors that are trying to do the posse comitatus insurrection stuff? FBI.
Right.
We're not talking about state police or whatever, or sheriff, or we're talking about FBI. We're talking about the people who they make movies of that are 007 and stuff like that. And these people know what's up. These people know that they're foreigners in land that's not theirs. They know that they're colonists.
And they didn't hide it. They never hid it.
Nothing to hide. That's a fact. They know who they are. They know their foremothers and forefathers. Trust me, they know their foremothers and forefathers.
Yeah.
But we don't know our own. We don't know our own to the point where our foremothers and forefathers put all their energy behind one man that came and told all these so-called people that think that they're whatever Europeans said that they are, that no, you're not none of those things. You're the actual Aboriginal, indigenous people of the land.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Dug in the ground, pulled up stuff with Egyptian writing on it. But it's in America. But Egyptian writing, but it's over here. What do you think he's trying to tell you? What do you think he's trying to tell you coming here, right? Coming here as, quote unquote, the Egyptian adept and then transforming Egyptian adept whatever information into Moor Science Temple.
Yeah.
The same thing that the Hebrew Jews of Harlem were trying to tell these dumb niggers when they said Moorish Zionist Temple of the Moorish Jews. They didn't call themselves black Jews. Where does this idea come up from that they're black Jews? Who made that up? Because if you check the history, and remember, we're talking about identity right now.
True.
We're not talking about some group that you're joining. We're talking about what's the identity. Noble Ali said that the Egyptians' identity turned into the Moorish identity. George G.M. James told him that the Egyptian identity turned into the Moorish identity.
Yeah. We the same people.
Told him that the Egyptian identity turned into the Moorish identity.
Well, there always was.
Yeah, it was always the same people.
So what's the problem? The problem is the people aren't thinking for themselves. They're listening to other people trying to tell them that this is ID. This is ID, so we're going to go with this because, you know, the state gave this to me. But you're conscious, claiming that you're, you know what I mean, original black man, and you have some white man's stuff that he gave you as ID. driving around and all that stuff. You got plates from the state. Where's your Black Nation plates at? It's identity is crucial. Identity is crucial because status determines what jurisdiction you in, what jurisdiction you come from. You think a Chinese can't come over here and say I'm American?
True.
Somebody from Australia is not going to come over here and say I'm American. The only people that do that is the Europeans. And then the only people who don't want to do that is Negro, Black, colored people. And the longer the people refuse to accept the fact that Noble Drew Ali been telling these people since 1913, the same stuff that we're still talking about, state licenses, 2016. The topic of discussion, right, is still the fact that these people who they themselves know that the stop you, let me see your ID, comes from the slave patrols.
Yeah.
The same stuff that they promote, that they say, you know, that's their foundation. But they'll willingly have a license and not connect why, not the fact even that they have them. I mean, I know Moors that have them. But Moors use their status and beat tickets with a license. They still get to drive off with the expired plates, expired license, no tickets, because they stood on their status. My status means that I'm not engaging in commerce on the public roadway. If I'm not engaging in commerce, I don't need a license.
That's quite simple, isn't it? Sounds simple, don't it?
Yeah.
Right?
And it is simple. And I trust that we'll all get to that point real soon. And if I may, because of one of the articles that was sent where they're questioning at the airport the driver's license instrument as being an identification card, because it is not. It never was. But we always, due to that lack of knowledge, we always thought it was. So now it's coming to a head. So the way I see it is, it's just as Prophet Noble Drew Ali always said, it's all going to be back in the hands of the Moors. As you're saying, it is up to the people to effectuate their liberties, and know what they are. And the lack of that knowledge is the only thing that has kept this from happening. And I think, and he mentioned earlier as well, we keep chasing after this and after thus, and the new thing that comes down the line, and it's all about jurisdiction. When people start filling out applications that are under the jurisdiction of quasi-national domiciles, such as a state or a corporation that has no judicial jurisdiction at all, they just make up stuff and we follow it, they're going to find themselves in agreements and contracts that they wouldn't be in if they hadn't, signed up for it. And they're going to find themselves under these jurisdictions and held to those things. And they're going to end up having to do what they need to do in the first place, which is to know themselves, to be themselves, to honor their mothers and fathers by name and principle. Also to know that they are the descendants of the mothers and fathers of civilization on the planet, and that the law of the land has already been laid down to protect them. And they need to do as Prophet Noble Drew Ali wants, enforce the Constitution for the United States of America, because it is to keep others from molesting. So, we said that 1,000 and thousands of times, but it's coming to a head where if one is truly seeking to be themselves, I guess that's the best way to put it, and therefore be free as they're born free, they will have to end up right back at this information. And they will have to end up studying it if they haven't. And they will have to drop the belief systems and graduate to knowledge, because belief is the precursor to knowledge, to knowing, and faith in what you know is the precursor to manifesting that reality. And that doesn't escape anyone. That's how it goes. That's just the way it is. It's no one's opinion, it's no one's belief, it's the way it all works. So they're going to end up there. I just wanted to say, too, you were saying that, Prophet Noble Drew Ali did set up and tell us everything in reference to a nation state. Ms. read some of the rules of law regarding a nation state, their culture, their law, etc., like that. He did that knowing that that's really what it is all about. That he said it. He said, I declare you are a nation, but we have to know that, be that, and act upon it as if we are. Now, we know why, we can go back in history, like you said, going through history and all of that. We can do that and find out why in the mental and psychological conditions we're left in as a result and all that. But the bottom line is simply that we need to know. As was mentioned earlier, we need to know. And instead of chasing after fake things, we need to know what's real. And it's been laid down. It's once you get to a certain point, you realize how simple it is. Now, is there resistance? Always was, because they, under deceit and under the fact that, as you mentioned earlier, they know where they come from. They never hid it. We're the only ones who do not know the truth. Like the miseducation, those who need to know, everybody knows except those who need to know. That's a fact. That's a strong fact. So now I find that, and he also said he gave us something that we can't tear down. You can't tear this down. If we all stood on these facts and truths, if we all stood on this, we could not be torn down. It would be an impossibility. Really an impossibility. So, here we are with them questioning the driver's license instrument as to the fact that it is not an identification. It never was an identification. So let's say that what they're really saying is, show us an identification card. Now you have to go into what is an identification card. Now, we put it on the site. It's already there. We're already ahead of that if you studied it, what an identification card is. As a courtesy, really, is what it is. But what it actually entails. Well, the driver's license instrument does not entail any of that. It is a corporate, what we call an artifice. It's an instrument issued from a state, which can't issue you jack, but issued from a state, and it does not. See, this is about national and international across all four corners of the earth right now. So it doesn't. It fails. It fails in the arena of what an identification is. So now let's just say what are they going to do? Go back and fix it and put nationality on it, because it's got to have a nationality on it. You're talking national and international intercourse, got to have a nationality. What nationality would they put? And then we don't care what they would put. Whatever they put, issued from a state, does not have anything to do with you. That's the important thing to know. But if they started putting nationality, then they start saying, oh, I'm German, oh, I'm French, oh, I'm whatever, like that. And the one thing would be sure, they're not American nationals, that's for sure. So who are the American nationals? Now, they may be of a citizenship rank, but they're not the American nationals. So they can't say that they are. Also, some of the so-called Indians are offended. They don't want to be called Indians. Those who know the history and know the lineage and know what they descend from, they want to be termed as Native Americans. Now, of course, we're Native American. The whole deceit thing was for them to be able to take and usurp the position and sort of, it's called birthright theft, to take the position of being Aboriginal, Indigenous, American nationals, which is an impossibility. It's really sick. And it's actually, when you get to study, you realize that it's actually a sick place for someone to come from. But that's what they were trying to do. Well, they can't do that because it's clear that it's time for everyone to confess their own. And what is it? Speak their, every tongue must confess their own. And so with this driver's license instrument that we all been putting energy into in our thoughts, our minds, our deeds, we've all been being accosted as a result of that one single artifice. When you really think about it, because your liberty, personal liberty in its most strictest form, is the ability to go from one point to another without hindrance, be it walking, however the traveling is. And that is the one instrument that they used to actually hinder and accost and abuse the people. And now the world, they're being looked at like, well, wait a minute. This driver's license instrument is not an identification. It's not going to pass as an identification at the airports anymore. Now, how many of you ever thought that it will come a day when we all talk about, well, they won't accept my ID. No, the only people who seem to not want to, because they weren't trained to accept it, is the corporate employees, of the corporate corporations. Those employees, they're the only ones. Now, how about this? They won't be accepting their driver's license instrument as ID. Now, where's that going to put you? Since you think that their stuff is ID, it never was ID. It never will be ID, and it's all coming to a head now. So the real ID, everybody talks about it. It's not the driver's license instrument. I'm glad to see it fall. And the other thing you mentioned about, now I have to say this, though. Some of us will probably try to fight to keep the ID, keep the driver's license instrument as ID because we know nothing else, because we don't know, and, we claim it as our ID now. Yeah, well, can I see your ID? First thing you do is flip out a driver's license. Now, I know when I traveled on the airplane, I was in that line where everybody was driver's license upon being asked. And when I didn't give them a driver's license, they stopped because they're not used to seeing it. But many people listening know that that's really not a problem because many have, used successfully as Cujo, you mentioned. There's many successes. Now, a lot of people don't want to talk about those successes because of the native energy that comes back at them from those who are still ignorant. Your ignorance, they're making finances off of our virtues and our ignorance. So the ignorance can actually harm people who are in a positive energy spot. It can actually harm them. Not that they're not armed for it, but, we're talking about your liberties. We're talking about the very core of yourself, and you cannot allow that to be infiltrated by negative energy to break it down. This is the time when we have to build up, not be brought down, especially by your own. So you don't hear a lot of that because I know some people would try to bring you down, even though you will be hearing a lot of that because that is what is going on and what will be predominantly happening because it's all going to be in the hands of the Aboriginal Indigenous people more. That's a fact. So that's what's happening now, and that means across all four corners of the earth. So I would say that, this is a good time, but then there's no such thing as time. It's just a matter of cycles. I wanted to say that when Cujo mentioned about FBI coming to investigate people, first thing you need to know is this is true. The FBI, if they were to come to investigate or discuss or whatever they're doing, you better have the right words, because as Cujo said, they're only coming to see if you really are in honor of your mothers and fathers. They really want to see if you really are who you say you are, because that's the true identification is yourself. You know, you don't necessarily need anything like when you have a writ or a identification card is included in a brief that expresses your position regarding a matter. You know, like if you don't understand what's on that card or what the brief is saying, because then, you know, you're not really what it is. You're not really presenting it. And that is the fine distinction line between those who say, oh, well, it works okay for me or all right for me, and someone says, well, it didn't work for me because you ran your mouth and said things that put you in the jurisdiction that you thought you were supposed to be out of by your words. And you didn't match what the paper says. If you did decide to write, or if you are carrying an identification card that's an allodial card, such as I know the one that we hand out. So if you don't match what's on that card, and believe me, we know a lot of people don't match what's on that card just by what they say and what they do because they haven't studied it enough. But again, we put it on the site for the review, but they won't review it. Looking for this quick fix thing. So if the FBI came and you didn't have the right words, they already know. Oh well, they're not going to stand the test. They're not going to stand the real deal because they don't really know. The other thing to look forward to, because these modern Europeans that are deceivers, and corporations, and they're training their employees because, you know, they're good people everywhere. Because they're deceivers, they'll start setting up what we call alliances or groups or offices. Then they'll call them the FBI. Oh, yeah. They'll come to you and say, oh, well, we're from the FBI. You better be sure and check that because they just set up an office and work right out of the same municipal building that they send the policy forces out to costume or the highwaymen to travel on the road in a costume, the traveler. They'll have an office right out of there. Now, you know that don't make no sense. The FBI ain't in the municipal building. And they're not sitting. It doesn't work that way. So you have to be sure that you know who is who and what is what, starting with yourself. And lastly, I have to say this, and then we can move on. I was just saying about the writ and spelling and what we write. It's interesting because it just hit me that I had this dissertation with this person who, you know, someone was out there teaching them to print their name instead of signing it. So they wanted to print their appellation in terms of their autograph. They wanted to print. They were back and forth with me. Well, I don't want to, you know, use cursive writing because it means it's a curse, right? Things like that. So, you know, I just want to say
that's David Miller and those change your lowercase to higher case and this another branch of European sovereign
bullcrap, right? Yeah. Well, that's what I just want to say this about that. Check it out, Cujo. When you write a writ, you're spelling, right? You are casting a spell. Am I right? Right. That's right. So you're casting a spell. That's why they call it spelling. So that is also called curse, that's why it's called cursive writing, because you're casting a spell. Now, whether it's a good spell or a bad spell, that's up to you. That is up to you totally. That karma will come back to you. But that is another example of two things, I guess. One is our spookiness about what a spell is and what spelling is, you know, and what Cujo was saying, that comes from, I don't know what group you said, but whatever group you said it came from, there you go, following after some modern Europeans.
Patriots. But they must have thrown trash. I said modern European patriots that threw some crap in the trash and Moor's running in trash and pulled it out.
Yeah. Yeah. What was in it? It doesn't really matter who it is. What we need to start doing is following our own, learning our culture, knowing who we are, and being who we are as one nation, because it's coming. You're either going to be in it or you're not. And I don't know where you're going to end up. I don't know what's going to end up happening really to us all, but we do kind of know. But if you're still hanging on to the words of the Europeans and the new thing they got out, because they're scrapping like heck to maintain something that is not theirs to maintain. A lot of them are. And others are recognizing. They know. Like Susan said, they know who they are. It's just that the gig is up, but yet we're still running around. And you know, the example, you got the I'm getting my sovereign through a UCC. Well, no, you're not. Now you got the birth certificate redemption. That was some heavy energy stuff. Just got into a contract. Don't even really know the full issues regarding nationality. They're going to claim that you're a national and then do quasi-national stuff. They just sucked all of them in, and all of them are going to have to answer to those contracts they made.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. You know, you said a few things, man. I actually said quite a few things. I'm telling you, first of all, I want to say this. I hope right now people listening on this broadcast know that you have got to have your pen and paper handy when you're listening to this show, or I should say broadcast, because if you don't have your pen and paper handy, you're going to miss a lot. I mean, there's so much to be said, but I want to first say this. I don't care if it's this broadcast, Military Teaching School, either Eyes Wide Open, Sons of Allah, Sisters Standing on Law, or even the white broadcast classes that we do. I don't care what it is. Whatever information we are giving you, you are obligated to go and look it up and research it so that you can know. All right? There is no obligation whatsoever. This is not about you just listening to what we say, and then you just saying either Cujo or Ms. Rahim or Reverend told me, or I got this from the either Reverend Cujo or Ms. Rahim. That's not what this is about. If you have not studied everything that's on this, if you go for an identification card, national identification card, or you're doing the confirmation and name correction, you ought to not, I'm going to put some stress on this. You better not send those documents in unless you have read the website. I'm telling you this. Just like Ross said, that if you sign anything, you're testing yourself. If you're writing your name, you're writing, I'm using names, you're writing your appellation, right? The right to appellation, you better have read their website, because the universe is going to send a test.
Yeah.
The universe is going to send a tester. That's the time. That's the time it is. The tester. Hold on now. I don't have to look at it.
Something is scratchy right now, fam.
Yeah, seriously scratchy.
You're going in and out. You're going in and out.
Okay, let me just a minute.
Sound like it's successful.
All right. Wait a minute. All right. How's that? All right. As I was saying,
you know what? I want to say this. The thing that you're saying right now is that when the prophet said that your nationality card will change in your pocket, that's what a lot of people are going to be experiencing also, if they do know what they have and what it is.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I'll say this. You know, we make a lot of presumptions, and one of the big presumptions that was made in this whole article that we filled out. By the way, the article is on MHHS-Eyes Wide Open Facebook page. It's right underneath the syllabus for today's class. It's on there. So if you didn't get the email and you want to look at it right now, it's there. All right? But the question that we need to ask ourselves, because there's so much presumption made in this article, it says that the feds said something. The feds. What the heck is that? What is that? And you know, where is that written, you know, so that I can know who it is that I need to go and talk to? Who's the feds? Now, the presumption that's made in this article is the feds is the Department of Homeland Security. But this is where we have to ask questions. I see the documentation that says, I mean, and as it relates to law in harmony with the American Constitution, can I see the documentation that delegated authority to the Department of Homeland Security? Because let me tell you right now, in truth, the Department of Homeland Security is just another corporation.
Mm-hmm.
You can call a corporation anything you want. It doesn't mean that it is acting like Federal Express. Everybody knows that Federal Express is the Fed. And so how come you don't know that the FBI is not the Fed? How come you don't know that the Department of Homeland Security is not the Fed? But if I say that, somebody know, oh, that's not the Feds. Why not? The FBI, if you watch the movie J. Edgar Hoover, I think, is it J. Edgar Hoover, who started the whole FBI corporation, if you watch that movie, they tell you in that movie that the FBI is an internal agency of the federal government. That's all they call Bureau of Investigation, and they just add federal to it. Everybody thinks it's some department. It's another corporation. It's a corporation within a corporation. But also, you know, Roz mentioned Americans, you know, and how people want to be called Native Americans. But see, I'm gonna tell you, there's two qualifiers. Whenever you hear the word American, it don't stand on its own. The United States, it don't stand on its own. You have to include the qualifier. The qualifier was always there, never left. Just that people wasn't given what the qualifier is. So we will hear American, but then leave off the qualification. American what? American citizen. All those first. American national. Those are the Aboriginal and Indigenous people of the land. Now when you hear Native American, still qualifier necessary. Because, see, Native American national, okay, I know exactly who you are. But Native American citizen, I don't know who you are. You know, and then we have the other qualifier is, you know, we hear state identification or government identification. But here's the thing. It doesn't have a nationality. It's a membership card. Now, we always talk about, you know, having that state identification card is fraud. How? And, you know, a lot of people don't process that. If I can just get you thinking, you would free yourself. But if you ain't studying, you ain't got nothing to think about. So you can't free yourself if you ain't putting it into the cranium. So you look at the driver's license. You know, in driver's license, we keep saying it's evidence of treason and fraud. I bet you nobody ever sat down and thought, well, how come? Why is it treason and fraud? What makes it fraud? What makes it treason? See, those are very key pieces of information. And, you know, whether you had a driver's license instrument, it's not even relevant. And look, I don't know about these people who are saying, oh, well, you know, I need to, I want to get rid of the driver's license. Why are you going to give them back the documentation, verifiable evidence that proves treason and fraud? Why would you give them back that? I know why. Because you're scared. Because you haven't studied. So you really don't know what I'm telling you. So you're scared. Oh, if I give it back, they won't come and mess with me. They won't pick me up. Or they won't this, they won't that. You know what? It don't even matter, because once they put a record in, they don't ever erase it. So you have to come one day. You got to make it so that it's not advantageous for them to use it. Well, how are you going to do that? Through study. But I'll tell you this. These are the two reasons why it's fraud. Because all county, city, town, township, boroughs are, by their own definition, corporations. Some of them ain't even trying to hide it. The building will say municipality. So municipality, or so municipal office, municipal this, municipal that. You know, municipal means corporation. Roman Vango.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with foreign corporations. Why? There's your treason, because they're not government. Why? There's your fraud, because they're not government. Why is it treason? This is why you ask simple, stupid questions. I'm telling you, keep it simple, stupid. If you ask them for the law that says that you are mandated to go and get an instrument that says you are a member not only of a union state, which can only be members that are modern Europeans. It's right there in Article 1 of the American Constitution. Not only are you a member of a union state, you're also a member of a Roman corporation. That is like double treason. People running from verifiable documentation of treason. You know why? Because you ain't studied. You don't even know just how much ammunition you got rolling around in your back pocket or your purse, trying to give it back to them. Because you're scared. You ain't did the studying. Studying is far more valuable than you being scared and giving them back the evidence to prove treason and fraud. Prophet says, study for a reason. I never heard him say, find a workaround, find a workaround, find a workaround. Never. So maybe CBS Moor ought to wake up so that we can start enforcing the Constitution that the prophet knew that we were capable of enforcing. He knew it. That's why he left it. Why would he leave us something that we were incapable of enforcing? Why would he tell us to do things that we were incapable of doing? It don't make sense. And from the little bit that I have read of the prophet, he is not so big. I've never met him in the flesh, but I will say this. Everything he has said that I have read has been right and exact. So he had to have given us these instructions because he knew we were capable of doing it, every one of us. He also said you're going to need each other more than ever before. That means we got to put our ego on the back burner. And sons, if you need the marvelous detailing of a sister, you need to be able to hook up and become a team. And sisters, if you need the brute strength of a son, we need to be able to hook up and be a team. Because he said we don't need each other more than ever before. And today, everything that I have read has been coming to fruition that the prophet has said. That's why he was called a prophet. Because he told us this is going to happen. There's been so many prophecies fulfilled in the last couple of years, it's ridiculous. I'm looking ahead. And I'm thinking, if I'm going to survive this transition, I got to first of all know that a lot of what Prophet Noble Drew said has come to fruition. Therefore, I better sit my behind down and take heed to what he has said and seriously implement that study, because I need to know how to navigate the next coming couple of months. And if you ain't studying, you ain't going to know how to navigate. And you're going to be like in one of those video games. You're going to get burnt up because you're going to miss the turn. And so you're just going to get out of the game. That's it. There ain't nothing else. You out of the game. If you ain't studying, you out of the game. And we get a lot of calls from people. Man, did you do shit? Excuse my language. I apologize. They be doing stuff that, either they getting out of the game or they sliced and something that they were on the verge of being out of the game, and it's just the grace of Allah that pulled them back from the charge of death. So we got to be a heck of a lot more proactive. We got to be, this next coming month, this year, I feel in my soul, it's going to be a hell of a year. You better be on your game. You better be studying up. If you ain't, we ain't going to see you in the Christian calendar year 2017, Moorish calendar year 1437. We ain't going to see you. Islam.
Islam. Wow. Well, we say that, I think we say that so intensely so because, I always go back to the one thing that was also said, and that is that don't matter what it looks like, it's all going to be in the hands. And then you look at, we have all come a long way, but I think it's the mental slavery portion, and then the ego, and then and then the wanting to gain something. Yeah. So that kind of mixed in is what has to be worked on first, because there's a lot of good things happening with people, as Tujo had mentioned earlier, and we see it coming down the line, and then we see how much how much we're behind. When I say we, I mean collectively, how much we're behind, and then the arrogance that shows with it. You already know what's going to happen with that, but everybody has everybody has their own karma to deal with in this matter. When we keep thinking that this is for the young and young born, we just have to keep, sharing information and building with those who have eyes to see and ears to listen. And just be very careful about the other energy that it doesn't, enter into your cipher. And the other thing where people keep saying, well, I don't even know how to say this because we help people as best we can. I think people help as best they can. And to say, well, aren't you going to help your brethren? Well, we have to be able to help ourselves. They have to be able to help themselves. We talked about this. It's almost like, well, what else did he really talk about? And we're saying it again tonight. Okay, so here's a great writ, and then you go use it, and you never read it. So you're not casting anything. That mentality is the deceiving mentality brought on by the use of attorneys who are never meant for the natural people anyway, because they are their first obligation is to the court or tribunal or corporation. Really, they really are. It's interesting how all of the pieces match up, because they really are to speak for things that cannot speak for themselves, which would be corporations. So that right there, once you get the definition on that, you would recognize they couldn't speak for you. So they just came together because of our lack of knowledge, and they saw ability to take advantage and make a lot of finance, etc., like that, based on our lack of knowledge. So that mentality of an attorney, and you have to have one in order to represent you. No, that's the exact opposite, because they're representing corporations, and so you're submitting and admitting to that as well. So it's that mentality that has to be erased, but once it's erased, people feel like they're on their own and they don't know what to do. And what it is that they are to do is to study, to have knowledge. And then, of course, it's, well, study what? What do I study? When we're dealing with national principles, we study national principles. When we're dealing with the law of the land, we study the law of the land. The law of the land is the American National Constitution, period. And so if anyone violates that, then you'll know they're violating the law. They are violating the law. When you deal with national principles, it's an easy breakdown. If you're a national, then you are of a national domicile, not of a quasi-national domicile, which is states, and definitely not of a municipal domicile, which is a Roman venue. And from those municipal domiciles and municipalities, that's where they send out the Roman soldiers or the policy enforcers or the private security guards in uniform to accost you, to abridge, to violate you, right from that point right there. Then they used to have, and we went along with, after they did that, well, the state of so-and-so versus you. Then you would go into one of their courts, not a state court at all, it's a municipal court, and they would rape you there. Now that the state, and it's been clear that the people are recognizing who the state is and who the state is not, and what the state's obligation is, which is to the law of the land as well. So now they're divorcing themselves from the state, or let's put it this way, the state is divorcing themselves from them. When you get a letter, for instance, and we've gotten them that, you write in about some municipality to the head of all of the administrative courts, and they say they're not in our jurisdiction, you immediately know that these people are renegades running on their own, violating the people's rights, and pretending. They're impersonating an officer of a court. They're impersonating a public trustee. They're just impersonating, period. So now that it's become clear, and the states are kind of backing off, like, oh, I don't have nothing to do with that, but I'll help you sue them, or, whatever I got to do. They're not going to take the action you would have to, of course. Now that that's happening, it's like now we're having a clear shot view on who it is that is doing what they're doing, and they're becoming these private employees for these private corporations that have been pretending to be government and been laying down statutes and policies and beating you upside the head for violating that policy that is not law. Now everybody sees them clear. not only do these Roman soldiers come out and cross people on the road, but they actually murder people. They actually are killing people. Not that they weren't doing it before, but it's all becoming clearer. And so at this point, it's so very important to take your stand so that you have standing. Now, recently, I think it was yesterday, the little boy that got shot, they acquitted them and said that they didn't do anything wrong. So what did they do? They started marching again. I know the people are going to get tired of marching. I know that they're going to figure this out, that it has nothing to do with that. This is what these people do. It's not what were you going to say?
No, I just say they're not going to get tired. They love marching.
Yeah? What are they going to do, march themselves right off the cliff?
If that's what it takes. If that's what it takes. Because, and it's not like, people around them don't know what's up. That's the other part of it. People around them know what they got to do. They know civil rights is unconstitutional and all that. But overseers, sellouts, that's what they're there for. Keep the people passive. Keep the people not exercising or learning about their true history, their true self. Because it's unfortunate, but it's also how much leeway did you give these people? I mean, this thing's supposed to be squared up 100 years ago. So, stuff that they're doing now, maybe it's warning signs for people to get their act together. Stop playing the ass.
Yeah.
That's
right.
Right.
There is no other way out. There really isn't.
All right.
No way out.
Well, with that, we got like 13 minutes left to the live broadcast. So what that means is at 11:30, the internet feed is going to go down. If it's possible for you to get in, you need to call 347-945-5899. If you're able to get in, great. If you're not able to get in, wait until after 12:30 a.m. to download the broadcast feed, and it'll be in the archive, and you can listen to the last hour. So with that, what we're going to do now, to the end of the broadcast, is we are going to take questions. So we start with caller 210-649. Please state your appellation at Northwest Maxim. Is mom caller 210-649?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was listening. I didn't really want to ask the question. I was listening, but the what you were saying is so true, because my brother has his Moorish card and his national ID, and they keep arresting him. And then this last time they arrested him and charged him with false ID, false identification. I'm like, wow, okay. So we're fighting that. But
do you know why they charged him with false ID?
Because they are. I don't think he's standing his square, really.
Which means he didn't quite study. No.
Yeah, he wasn't studying as much as he should be studying, and he's telling him he's an American national. And they're like, we don't care. They just take him and haul him off to jail. And I went down there with a habeas corpus, and the judge denied it. And I'm like, a habeas corpus
doesn't need to be approved or denied, and you really didn't even need to take it to the judge. Really, I believe the process is you take it to the and their names have to be on there. You take it to the sheriff, the warden, and then you can file or record a copy into his record, but that's only after you have completed that. But a habeas corpus doesn't have to be denied or accepted. That's not the purpose of it.
Well, I gave it to them, and they didn't. They said they wasn't going to let him out. So
you gave it to who?
Well, I took it down.
A habeas corpus is demand. They have to produce the body. A lot of people don't know this either. But the habeas corpus is simply saying, look, you got to produce the body and or the body of information in 3 days.
But what she's saying is, sis, is that you may have given it to the wrong people. There's a certain process that goes with that.
Oh,
and you took it down to you took it down to the county courthouse and the municipal courthouse or whatever like that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that was the wrong place because they're not really a court anyway. But even if they were, but they're not. But if they were, you still took it to the wrong place.
Oh, where was I supposed to the sheriff's office?
Taking it to the county court because I'm sure it's the county that's attacking your brother. There's the last stop. The first stop is you take it and get recorded in a federal court. And then they're going to give you that 3 copies. You take one of those that was addressed to the warden, you deliver it to the warden, and then you take, they're going to, when you go and register it in the federal court, they're going to keep a copy which leaves you with 2. You take 1. And you bring it to the warden, and the 3rd copy, I always tell people, make a color copy of for yourself, and then you take that last copy and you record that in the court record.
Okay. It was a Friday evening. So.
Go to the county, because I know it's the county that's attacking,
Yeah. Okay.
That's definitely a false imprisonment. And if you check out the National Identification card page on RV Bay Publications, it's definitely more than enough information there to further, have a defense and show how that's a malicious institution of accusations or malicious prosecution that's going to be employed either way. But, yeah, for sure, it's a lot of information there that proves that that's not fraud, starting with the universal right to self-determination, Part 2, Article 8. So that's international law again, and that's really what it boils down to. So in the law of evidence, that cannot be considered fraud. It has been situations where that has happened to other people, and that charge or accusation just disappears, like when you fight it right, like how but same thing. But
that just proves that they are not government, that they are not law enforcement, that they are not at all who they say they are, but they are in fact the ones who are the lawbreakers. Because the only thing that they're concerned about is to why they said I don't care. And I'm glad that you brought this to the table, and I hope people listening will get it. If they said I don't care, they're telling you the truth in that respect because they never were government. They're really like, to me, they're like gangsters, you know, in a fraternity and stuff, for real. And so that's all that they're really telling the people at this point. They're so frustrated that they don't care because once we take our stand and enforce the law, they will no longer be able to, you know, do what they were doing in terms of feeding their families. Not that their families shouldn't eat, ought not eat, but, you know, like their whole life will be turned upside down, you know.
Not off of us.
And the last will be first. And, you know, all that's done in the dark must come out in the light. And all of those wonderful spiritual affirmations is what we are in right now. So they're just really exposing who they're not, which is why if the people will get it together and come together on this knowledge, you know, we knocked this thing out the box because they just showed you they don't care. I mean, isn't that a lot of nerve of them? They say they're public. They say they're working for the a public trustee, and they're out here accosting the people's rights. They say they're government, which is supposed to protect those rights, and they're beating people upside the head and, you know, dragging them into court because of an identification that they have all of the right to establish on their own. So now, where are we? So now they're questioning what these people call an ID, which is a driver's license instrument, which is all that they are looking for because they have a big money, a big finance generating system with that one instrument. That is their baby right there, all right? So now they're questioning what that is. So that's getting ready to, potentially getting ready to fall for them. So they're in really bad shape, but all they're doing is exposing who they really are. Again, I say, if the people would recognize this and stop looking at them and calling them government, they'd be dead tomorrow. I mean, I don't mean physically, spiritually and conceptually, gone, done. And does that mean that they wouldn't still put on their uniforms and come out in the street? So we have to start enforcing the law, suing them personally, privately, and professionally, you know, because they're not government, all right? They're the ones who are they are the ones who are actually impersonating. They are the impersonators. They are. And
I asked her. I asked her for her name. I said, "Aren't you the magistrate?" And she said, "There's many magistrates." I said, "But aren't you the magistrate?" And she says, "I'm one of them." And I said, "Well, what is your name?" And she says, "I'm not going to give you my name." I'm like, aren't you the public servant? And she's like, "I'm not giving you my name." I was like, okay.
She's private. She has a private agenda then.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. There you go.
So yeah, I know they're not government.
We need to start seeing them as what they're not and dealing with them as the imposters that they are and the violators of law that they are. All right, that's what we have to collectively start doing because that's what it is.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Yes, Mom.
It's Mom.
All right. You know, as this conversation was going on, I thought I had another piece of information that I wanted to discuss. Not necessarily discuss, but I know the last so-called passport that I saw, which is why they're going to have a huge issue with this whole so-called nationality card that you can use, or I should say driver's license identification card that you can supposedly use to travel on the plane. One of the things that I saw on one of these card passports is they have a space for nationality. And another reason why this is fraud and treason is, number one, nationality is U.S.A. Now, from an international level, there is no nationality that is U.S.A. none. All right? That's number one. Number two, if you are a proclaimed Moor and you have a document that says that your nationality is U.S.A, that's treason. Because now we have to really clarify, what does U.S.A mean? Can't be presumptuous. Law is specific. Many of us don't know, in terms of the corporation, what exactly does U.S.A mean? Because law is specific. U.S.A can mean anything. So before you step to the table with guns blazing, you want to be able to have verifiable documentation that states, for the record, what exactly U.S.A means. All right? I'm just trying to tell you, you got to look at all of the angles. U.S.A. If it is said that U.A.S. means United States of America, you still dealing with a treason, because the United States of America spelled out is not a nationality. It presents a corporation or a member/worker employee of that corporation. So now, if there's some policy and procedure that says that people are compelled to identify themselves by corporation, that is unconstitutional, and that is treason. The last thing I want to say is no state, union state, or so-called federal instrument can be given to anyone of any nationality, much less more. Because in order for you to get a documentation that states your nationality, you have to go back to that nation and obtain it. You can't have, that's like saying, okay, I'm of Chinese descent, but I'm going to go to the United States of America to get documentation that shows that I am a Chinese national. Nobody does that. That's not easy.
Yeah. That means that only the sovereign can, quote unquote, naturalize or become a citizen. You would have to become a citizen of a sovereign nation, so only they can actually do that process. So they'd have to have something showing that. That's what it says in the Constitution. And so if they have something showing it from a quasi-national state, guess what? It's invalid.
Exactly. And I just want to make sure, because I know I hear people coming up with, well, what about naturalization or naturalization? Naturalization is not anybody giving up their nationality. Naturalization is simply saying you're under the protection of a family. What's the name of the family? Moor. Proper. Yeah. That's all that's saying. It's not changing the nationality. Just like if you went to, once again, China, you can become a Chinese citizen. But your nationality has got to be whatever your mother is. Because see, we got to get it into our head, deep into our heads, that look, all of these places, they just identify corporation. It's only the Moorish nation that actually, identifies the family. And then you have other families that identify the names. If they're not, they're still Moors. That's like, okay, my family, I have a portion of my family on this continent, a portion of my family on a large portion of my family on the island, another portion of my family over in Great Britain, but we still the same family.
So what you're saying
The location didn't change us. It just says, okay, I take mail over in Great Britain, or I take mail over in the Caribbean, or I take mail over in the United States, North America. I take mail over in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
It's just saying where you take mail. It's not even talking about your nationality, but they try to attach you to a Union State / corporation, or a national / corporation, or an international / corporation. They try to tie you in that respect, because you're not any of those corporations. You're one family, but mail near these various corporations. We got to really get that into our cranium. So we shouldn't be getting twisted about people who say they're from the Choctaw or the Washita or the Yamasee family, because I'm going to tell you what, even within that family, many of the people have different surnames, but they're still of that family. The name, the appellation doesn't divide you. It's just another form of you.
Right. One thing that I just wanted to go back on, because it seems really clear when you were saying that if you could become a Chinese citizen, but you damn sure ain't gonna become a Chinese.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Chinese national. They have
never going to
over here too. Yes.
Right.
It's all about membership, because they know a lot of times we're so clueless that this is all about how many members do you have. I mean, we didn't really realize that this is not just the temples and the churches. They're all about membership numbers. Well, guess what? All these other corporations are all about the numbers. How many members you got? I got so-and-so members. I got so-and-so members. Because, see, on a whole, because we're talking about everything about this is about finance, movement of debits and credits. And just credits. They don't care about the people, because in their minds, the people is nothing more than a commodity. And unfortunately, many of us speak and think we are commodity. So we play right into this lack of information game. We're not commodity. But in order for us to really put that across the board, we got to know you're not a member of a corporation nationally, domestically, or internationally. You're not. This is all about family bloodline. They mix it all up and think it's about commerce. Oh, what corporation am I attached to? You know what I mean? Oh, in New York, all right. Specifically, the boroughs of Queens. We just attached ourselves to these various different corporations as a member. Members are obligated to all sorts of things. Right. Members are obligated to all sorts of things. Yes.
And that's why they expect you to behave in a certain manner, because you are saying that you are a member of their club or of their corporation. So
that's right.
You know, it's been going that way for so long. Now all of a sudden the apple cart's getting shook up a little bit, and they're getting very shook up about it, and they're just coming out with some animal characteristics of being mean, lower self. You know, they're really, really frustrated. They're really, really frustrated about this. And many of them don't know and are learning. And for those who are learning, the prophet said, Europeans are helping, why aren't you? But that is really what we're looking at. So it's all coming out in the wash, and it will. Excuse me. But I wanted to also say, when you were mentioning about us being members, it's interesting, because I just finished doing someone's card from United Kingdom. Now, they know there are more, most of the people that are in that area were really from the Caribbean and the islands, etc., like that, the Moorish family there. And, they may have moved over or, traveled over or however they did what they did to be so close. But, they're more, but they take mail at a place that's in, let's say, London, or wherever it is. Because that's where they are. And I wanted to bring that up because some people don't, I trust by now they know that that's why it is imperative to have C/O in front of the mailing location. We don't call it an address because an address is what is issued from a corporate venue, usually from the municipality. A lot in block is issued from the county, and they work in conjunction with each other, of course. But we call it a mailing location where you take mail. And it doesn't necessarily have to be where you lay your ad, but it is where you take mail. And care of means you're not possessive as a more American national of it. You're just taking mail there. And when you get the card, there's a paragraph that expresses and explains that position. And unless you are ready to be able to receive that position and have understanding of it, therefore have outer standing or stand on it, then you shouldn't apply it. You should definitely know what that means and how to stand on that. But a lot of times you get intimidated by the things that they say, like, I don't care, like that. And I think the main reason why they do that they continue to do that or will continue to test the people is because they need to be sued. They need to, even if, they need to be sued to put them to a stop, which has been happening because ultimately it's coming to an end anyway. If we stay on this course, it's all going to be over. And you'll be telling them, you won't tell them then, but they'll know that we don't care. You stay in your lane. That's what the Constitution was written for. It's like the yellow lines in the road. Stay in your lane. If whatever policies that a person who says they are a member of these corporations that they call states and policies that they put out and who believe in these imaginary lines on their national ancestral estate, you don't live in Maryland. Your national domicile is in America. You take mail and care of whatever. So those who will continue to, as you're saying, be members of their corporation, they expect you to behave that way. Just that simple.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they do. All right. Well, let's get to our next caller. Call 972-839. You're live on the air. Please state your operation at Northwest Lansing.
This is Abdul Malik Shabazz at Core, Northwest Lansing. Once again, family, it's good to be in the house and listen to my sisters and mothers, and also to Miss Ram and Cujo. As Todd Tariq Bey and the instructor that have instructed me in my yearning in Europe, I always have a pencil and paper. I listened to y'all from the top of the show, and I was scratching down, and I stated, as I represent, conspiracy to commit fraud and treason against the natural people, person of their land, the Aboriginal people. If they conquer the body, they can redress the mind, and result will submerge wandering souls. Admiral Todd Tariq Bey, and you, my brothers and sisters, your conjoined Moorish commodity at Al-Hajj Sharik Abdul Ali tells us, Noble Jew Ali, study, study. And what we, as the Moorish nation, must learn, and we must study and go on RV Bay publication, and that is the #1 Moorish site in North America, in the North Gate. Study that site. Not only redress and go through and put your name on these documents, but know what you are doing and understand the law. Have you a dictionary, Black Law Dictionary, Bouvier Dictionary, have etymology dictionary, so you can break down these words and you know what you're doing and what you're getting on into, and what when you get into something, what you're off into, what you are up against. The main predator is the secret treaty of Verona. The congressional records of Senate, the 64th Congress, the first section, volume 53, part 7, page 6781, was dealt and done, presented April the 25th, 1916, ETC. You can go at Article 1. What they are, contracting, powers being conceived, that the system of representative government is equally as incompatible with the monarchical principles as the maximum of the sovereignty of the people, with the high divine right engaged mutually in the most solemn manner, to use all their efforts to put an end to the system of representative government in whatever country it may exist in Europe and also in the North Gate, as they call U.S.A. America. And we know we are the people of the land, American. We, us, more, no one else. You can be neutralized, but you're not naturalized. You're not the natural person on this continent. And I'll leave you with this here. Article 3, convinced that the principles of religion contribute most powerfully to keep nations in the state of passive obedience, which they owe to their princes, the high contracting parties declare it to be their intent in their own respective states, those measures which the clergy may adopt with the aim of ameliorating their own interest. So immediately, intimately connected with the preservation or preservation of the authority of the princes, and the contracting power join in offering their thanks to the Pope for what he has already done for them, the Europeans, and those who have keeping us in substitute and subjugation. Solicit his constant cooperation in their view of submitting the nation. And what that summed up to, you are under the codes of the color of law. If you do not know yourself and know who your foremothers and your forefathers were, and if you do not study law and history, is one. Islam.
Islam. Oh man, that's so true. I just want to add on briefly to what the brother just came through on the line with. That was real valuable information in conjunction with what you were saying earlier about families on the E. So this is just an excerpt in the reference point. Moors or anybody could go check this out. This is from out of Institutes of International Law, Volume 1, page 138, and it makes the distinguishment between real treaties and personal treaties. And, to gain understanding of why that Treaty of Verona does not apply to us, though they use that secretly. So let's look at this real quick. Again, page 138, Institutes of International Law. It says real treaties are contracts relating to national affairs concluded by sovereigns in their civil capacities as representatives of the states whose organs they are. Because you talk about a body, you got to talk about organs. But then you got to understand the difference between states and quasi-national domiciles, too. So it says personal treaties, though, are improperly called treaties, for they are not international contracts, but contracts of sovereigns in their natural capacities concerning the interests of themselves and their families. So like you were saying earlier about protection for families, when you look at this, this secret treaty is not, it doesn't have standard, though they use it, that's a fact. But this is why, it's important to declare our nationality because, we didn't agree to that as a whole. And those are personal treaties. They expire with the person who made them, in international law, to say the least. I just wanted to add that on. Shana.
All right. We're going to take our next caller. Thank you.
Sure. Islam, you there?
She fell asleep.
Islam. Islam, man.
You know what it says? Hate put me in prison, but love is going to bust me out of here. Real love.
Yo, peace. On the E, y'all there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh.
Yeah. I was like, hold on, something not right. Something definitely wasn't right for a second there. For a nice little minute. I just thought it was my phone tweaking, but nah.
Oh, all right. I didn't.
Yeah.
I heard you ask if we were here.
Okay, I didn't hear anything back. That might have just been me. I don't know.
All right. We're going to take our next caller, 513-981. You're live on the air. Call 513-981. You're live on the air. Please state your appellation and Northwest Mexican.
Islam, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. That was, I couldn't hear anything either. That was really weird. It kind of threw me off. But I was calling because I wanted to make a comment about the top of the show, the topic about about the Real ID Act, and you were talking about it was something that was enacted that was put out about 10 years ago, and it's just not being enforced. Right. So about the Real ID Act, I had did some study on that, but about 3 years ago, RV Bay Publication had actually published, and I had it, but I lost it. published an article. I don't know who wrote it. I think it was Roz. It was called the Real ID Act. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Do you guys remember?
Yeah.
On RB?
Yeah, because we did a broadcast on it before.
Yeah. So, correlating to what they have it right now, as far as the people not being able to get on the planes without or using certain state IDs or something like that. What's really going on is when the Real ID Act came out about 10 years ago, all of the states didn't actually change their so-called IDs in accordance to the Real ID Act. And so what's happening is the states that didn't change their IDs are now being forced, 2016, to actually get those IDs changed. And so anyway, I wanted to read something. I wanted to read the Real ID Act. It was a part of the paragraph, or the first paragraph, just a part of it, to show how it correlates when I actually read the Real ID Act and who it actually pertained to, because I remember that when the Real ID Act had came out, a lot of people in this so-called territory were actually going and getting their IDs switched, because they were switching their IDs so that it can, so that it can actually, correlates with the Real ID Act when the so-called quasi-state had switched their IDs. So anyway, the Real ID Act is for those who are and this is I'm reading from the Real ID Act. It's actually published on RB Bay Publication. I do not know what page it's on. I had printed this out it was like 3 years ago, but when you read it, I brought it back out, but I don't know where it's at. If somebody know where it's at on RB Bay Publications for people that want to read it, but it's called the Real ID Act. The Real ID Act is for those who are members, citizens of the same, just because they establish for themselves a state corporation or a municipal corporation, which is a quasi-national domicile and a municipal domicile, with their own policies, court ordinances, and statutes, and private corporate constitutions. Nowhere, no way does it mean you are to abandon the law of the land or the enforcement of the law of the land, which is the American Constitution. This is where the need of study falls directly upon us, and because of any failure to study, we suffer. So I wanted to point out that where it says that this is no way doesn't mean you are to abandon the law of the land or to enforce the law of the land, which is the American Constitution, and this is where the need of study falls directly upon us, because any failure to study, we suffer. So for those people who jumped on the bandwagon without going to study first, which I did, and this is in the Homeland Security, and when you go, even just on their site, and you go to where they have the Real ID Act and just things about the Real ID, it actually states that the Real ID does not apply to enforcement of the law, and it does not apply to constitutionally protected activities. It says that right in there. So, right, isn't that crazy? It says that right in there. It says it does not. This Real ID Act does not apply to constitutionally protected activities. And so I just thought that was just real interesting. And then
that is very telling. I'm gonna have to go find that myself.
Yeah, I'll send it. I'll send you the email because and it's just funny.
That's very serious. That's gee, that's really excellent. There's your against all of these county, city, township, boroughs. There it is, right there.
Exactly.
From a quote federal agency. Well, they don't say they're a federal agency, but they say federal government, and then they say Homeland Security. So now I just made the presumption that Homeland Security is the federal government or a part of the federal government. We still need to get documentation, but their website says that. I would like a copy of that. Send me the link. MHHS-Eyes Wide Open at gmail.com. Because that right there is some good ammunition.
Yes, indeed. In conjunction with the Ninth Amendment there.
Exactly.
Yes. But they're telling you it doesn't apply, and it's a constitutionally protected activity.
And that's the exact word.
That means they know.
Yep.
But they're betting that the people don't know through lack of what? Study.
And
It's
that's why
that was a big nugget. I like that.
Yeah, and that's why I read that first paragraph of the whoever, I don't know who, I think it was Sister Roz who wrote the Real ID Act, and I thought that correlated because the lack of study, we do suffer, and there you go. If you study, you would already know that you wouldn't have to participate in the so-called Real ID Act because they said in the Homeland Security, it says it does not apply to constitutionally protected activities. And it said other things that it applies to.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now we can.
Okay, I had to come off of my cue because I was speaking and you couldn't hear me, so I came off on the handset. You know, I wanted to ask you, I know this is Sister Jayana, right?
Yes,
all right. What you just read, because we did an article on it, but also I put up a piece of an article from Elihu Pleasant Bay. It's also on there, and you'll find that on I know it's on the What's New page because I keep everything on there. You just have to go down. But I also think I have it on the Food for Thought page. But what you just read comes right out of the Real ID Act. That's what you're reading, right?
Yeah, she just said that.
Yeah, not out of my editorial or
no. At the beginning, I read the Real ID Act, and it was something from R.B. Bay. I just read that where you said the enforcement law that did come out of R.B. Bay publication, and then when I said it does not apply to the Constitution, that came out right out of the Real ID Act on the Homeland Security.
That's what I wanted to get really clear. Now that part right there that you're talking about. Oh, my gosh. We send that excerpt to us.
I'm about to send it right now.
What page is that? I mean, what I'm saying is that, you know, it's interesting that you're reading right out of it. Now, most people, they would go right past what was just said. It would just go right over their head if they didn't have knowledge on it. Because, Dad, I'm trying to open up. Hold on a moment. Shucks. I want you to repeat that again. It says it does not apply to what?
Okay, hold on. I was sending an email.
Just read that again.
All righty. Shoot.
Constitutional activities.
Oh, yeah. It says Real ID does not apply.
Protected.
Constitutionally.
Read it again. Hold on. I'm sorry. Start reading it again. Does not apply what?
Real ID does not apply to the constitutionally protected activities. And then in parentheses, I don't know, you know, just in case, it says including a defendant's access to court proceedings. And it say law enforcement, and it says a lot.
Well, hold on. Defendant's access to